Hello and welcome to History Cupboard, a show in which we delve into the dustier corners of the past and unearth interesting people and events and facts. Today I'm talking about 10 things you probably didn't know about the Vikings. Number one, Ragnarok was real. Ragnarok, as you may know, is the great battle that's fought at the end of the world. And the heroes and the resurrected heroes and the gods all fight each other and all die, and the world is destroyed in catastrophe and flooding and fire, and it's just the end of the world. It's a big cataclysmic event, and this may actually have been a real event that happened in the middle of the 6th century, between AD 536 to AD 540. There were a lot of volcanic eruptions along the equator, huge eruptions, which created a dust cloud that blotted out the sun over much of northern Europe. And this dust cloud created a pallor over the whole of the northern part of Europe, which was rather like a nuclear winter. The impact was not unlike that of a nuclear winter, writes Professor Neil Price in The Children of Ash and Elm. So basically all the crops, the trees died, the crops failed, the animals starved, and people fought each other tooth and nail over very scarce resources. So it was a huge catastrophe 200 years before the start of the Viking Age. And it may have been that this became a folk memory of Ragnarok. Okay, number two, Viking travel spanned the globe. Many people know that the Norse, it wasn't Columbus who discovered America, it was the Norse in the 10th century, and there's lots of archaeological evidence in Newfoundland, in a place called Lons aux Meadows. We know that this is true. But what a lot of people don't know is they got as far as Persia in the Middle East. They went certainly to the Caspian and Black Sea and the Caspian, and as far as Baghdad. And historian Kat Jarman writes, the consensus seemed to be that there's a guy called Ingvar the Far-Travelled. Actually, I got that for my character in here called Far Traveller. Ingvar the Far-Travelled went as far east as Central Asia. Ingvar's journey took him to Persia and somewhere between the Black Sea and the Caspian, a stepping stone on a journey towards Baghdad. So they really were going quite far east as well as far west. Number three, the Viking economy was based on slavery. At the beginning of the Viking Age, the 8th century, they had what's called a bullion economy. They basically didn't have any coins. They traded they bartered with each other, or traded hack silver, which is basically you take a silver cup and you hack it apart, and then you sell the bits by weight to each other, and that's your bullion economy. 200 years later, in the middle of the 10th century, they had a lot of coins, Arab coins called dirhams, and this was created by the slave trade. They would go to what are now the Slav lands. Slave and Slav are the same word, and they would capture human beings and sell them in the Middle East. It was a horrible trade. But that's what they were doing, and that's how they became rich. Not so much the raiding, more the slave trading. Number four, Viking shipbuilding and navigation was second to none. If you live in a region like Norway, it's much easier to travel by boat around the fjords rather than going up over the mountains. So it's a bit like the Western Isles of Scotland. They had a sort of water-based travel system. So you didn't go over the mountains, it was just too difficult. You just went round the corner into the next fjord on your boat. And what this gave rise to was really sophisticated knowledge of seas and boat building and that kind of stuff. The Norse were building ocean-going ships well before anyone else in Europe. They were skilled navigators, able to steer by the stars, the sun, and the currents, which they tracked and made record of. A description exists of the sea routes west to Greenland from Scandinavia via the Orkneys, the Faroe Isles, and Iceland. So they knew what they were doing, and they were streets ahead of everybody else. Number 5, Vikings invented the medieval chivalric order. There was a group of Viking called the Yom Vikings, who were based on the Baltic shores of Poland, and they were a sort of prototypical chivalric order, rather like the Templars or the Hospitallers or the Teutonic Knights. And it was men only, no women and children were allowed. They swore oaths to each other. They had to be physically present in a particular place. They couldn't just go where they liked. They all had to be, they were allowed to go for 3 days, but after that you had to get permission. Very much like a chivalric order. They hired themselves out as mercenaries, often to Christians, and they were in fact a very formidable force. They had a fleet of perhaps as many as 300 longships in their harbour, so they were a significant military force. Number 6, the Norse were well groomed. We tend to think of Vikings as big, hairy, smelly barbarians, but actually the archaeological evidence suggests that they were in fact quite fastidious about their appearances. Numerous combs have been discovered in Viking graves, tweezers for plucking hair, and little tiny spoons for scraping out the earwax from their ears. All these grave goods have been found in Viking graves. There was a Muslim merchant from Spain called Ibrahim ibn Yaqub who visited Hedeby in South Denmark in 965, and his account, he describes both men and women using makeup, using kohl, a black thing, to enhance the beauty of their eyes. Both men and women were doing this. So if you've seen the Vikings TV series and they're wearing a lot of makeup, that's probably accurate. They also may have used makeup to make themselves look more terrifying in battle, a bit like the North American Indians used war paint. There may be a similar thing going on there. Some Viking warriors were women. In 1889, a grave was discovered in Birka near Stockholm, and they found a 10th century Viking skeleton in there, and it was surrounded by weapons with sword, an axe, spear, arrows, 2 shields, and for more than a century scholars thought that this was a male warrior because of the weapons and stuff. And then in 2017, DNA analysis revealed that this was in fact a woman of about 30 years old. And not only was she a female warrior, she also had various gaming pieces that suggested that she had a strategic role. So she was an officer. And Professor Price writes, taking a clear-eyed look at the archaeological data, it would seem there really were female warriors, including at least one of command rank. Number 8. Berserkers may have suffered from a rare bone disease. You will know that I have a deep interest in berserkers, and this is my book, The Last Berserker, the first in the Fireborn series. But I discovered this when I was researching that series. There's a guy called Egil Skallagrimsson, a 10th century Icelandic warrior poet who was also a berserker. He fought for Ethelstan, King Ethelstan, at the Battle of Bruinborough in AD 937. His tendency to go berserk may have been driven by a rare disease that he had called Paget's disease, which causes severe pain, and the pain gives rise to sudden rages. So he's having a really bad day and he just goes a little bit crazy. The disease thickens the bones of the body up to 4 times. So your arm bones and it could be up to 4 times thicker, which gives you bulk, but also the appearance of being impervious to blows. It's very difficult to break somebody's arm if it's 4 times as thick as you think it is. After Egil's death, they dug him up, and an enemy tried to split his skull with an axe, and the blade just bounced off the skull because it had been thickened so much. The blade just bounced straight off. Okay, Vikings, now this is number 9. Vikings wore spectacles in battle. The Norse usually didn't usually have horn. We know they didn't have horns. That's old hat. Forgive my joke. They sometimes had wings, but most of the time they just wore plain conical steel hats, steel caps. But they sometimes attached round, flattened iron rings attached to the front onto the nasal guard, and they looked a little bit like this. So you might be able to say that the Vikings wore spectacles in battle. Lastly, number 10. Norse religion has striking similarities to Christianity, and whether that's been added on afterwards or it's just a common pool of ideas about religion that's going around Europe, I don't know. But if after Ragnarok, we started with Ragnarok, we'll finish with Ragnarok. After Ragnarok, the world is submerged in water, everybody's destroyed, except for two people who are a bit like a Norse Adam and Eve. They're called Lif and Lifthrasir. And they live in a wood, not the Garden of Eden, they live in a wood, and they repopulate the earth. They're the first the earth is repopulated, regenerated, and the cycle all begins again. The wood, some researchers say, is actually the world tree, which has a serpent wrapped around it, in the same way that the tree of life in the Garden of Eden in Christian mythology has a serpent wrapped around it. So there's parallels there as well. There's also parallels with the crucifixion. Odin, the father of the gods, the All-Father, he allows himself to be killed and hung up on a tree, and there he willingly sacrifices himself and he dies, but he comes back to life after 9 days, which has got echoes of Christ and his resurrection after 3 days. So there are quite a lot of things there. Anyway, that's my 10 things you probably didn't know about Vikings. I am the author of this series of books about Vikings, if you like this kind of thing. There's 5 of them, starting with The Last Berserker, all available from Amazon. And that's it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next History Cupboard.